Hello, my research for this course will focus upon financial literacy and retirement planning across the countries of the G7. The following literature review will cover 4 research articles which support my hypothesis that retirement planning is lacking across many nations and is severely impacted by financial illiteracy. I decided to include this visual just to give you an idea of retirement readiness across several countries. Some of these are a part of the G7 and some are not. So in a survey conducted in 2016-2017 by the Egon Center for Longevity and Retirement, it was found that for the first time, over half the countries surveyed scored a 6 or better in terms of retirement readiness. This means that over half of the countries scored at a medium level of retirement readiness, where the other half would have scored at a low level. As you can see here, in order to be at a high level, you must score an 8 or better, and in this case, there were no countries that scored at that high level. The average of the 15 countries surveyed was 5.92, and it's even, I think, more important to state that of these surveyed, even if they stated or it was observed that they are ready for retirement, many of the participants did make the comment that they were going to continue to work during years of retirement. So again, I think this visual gives a pretty good visual representation that retirement readiness is not widespread. In this specific presentation, each paper is going to explore the lack of retirement planning among citizens of each distinct country. The first one will just look at retirement planning in the United States, and the following 3 research articles will look at not only retirement readiness, but also how it is affected by financial literacy. Those 3 countries will be Sweden, Germany, and the United States. Again, retirement preparation is a concern among many countries across the G7, as seen in the previous slide. In the last few decades, many companies have actually transitioned from a defined benefit plan to a defined contribution plan in terms of their employees' retirement. What that means is, in short, that employers are placing more responsibility on their employees to invest, to save, to plan for those expenditures which will happen after they have finished their career. So that has become a problem because many citizens of several countries aren't simply ready to have that kind of financial responsibility. And why is that? Well, because financial literacy is not a required course of most school curricula. It might be offered, but it's not a mandatory course for students to take. So that's why I've decided that my overall focus of this literature review and also of my research will be how financial literacy impacts retirement readiness. These will be the 4 papers that we're going to look at in this presentation. The first one is the one that solely looks at retirement preparation. The following 3 will look at the impact of financial literacy on retirement planning, first in Germany, next in Sweden, and lastly in the United States. So first looking at the EBRI Retirement Readiness Rating, Retirement Income Preparation, and Future Prospects. This was published by the authors in 2010. It was conducted by the Employee Benefit Research Institute, which provided assessment of national retirement income prospects. They focused on 3 age groups: the early baby boomers, the late baby boomers, and the Generation Xers. So they compared kind of these age groups. But in short, they did find that at all 3 levels, only about half were prepared to fund their needs post-career. The motivation of this specific study was to model retirement income adequacy to possibly better understand which groups are more at risk and to have insufficient funds upon the age of retirement, and then also how much more do they need to save to kind of reach that threshold where they would be ready. So methodology. One of the models used in this paper was referred to as the RSPM, namely the Retirement Security Projection Model. This model provides detailed what is called micro-simulation projections, which give the percentage of households approaching retirement who are at risk of having inadequate funds to fund post-career expenditures and uninsured medical expenses. A microsimulation model uses computerized analytical tools to perform extreme detailed analysis of a given data set. So it's definitely not OLS, but it does provide a detailed analysis so we can kind of observe results and make conclusions based on the set of data. Again, the results were retirement planning is lacking among all age groups, I think at least at the 50% level. There were strengths of this paper. There were 22 visual aids. They were comparing to similar models, offering why their model might be a better model to consider when looking at retirement preparation, and then also a model that would be very beneficial when making policy changes. In my opinion, the weaknesses were mainly the model. It was not fully explained. It was difficult for me to overall interpret the results. I really kind of relied on the visuals in order to best understand the conclusions of this paper. Now, before we get into the next paper, I do want to kind of discuss what these three papers, the data set that they used. So the following three papers will include surveys which attempted to assess levels of financial literacy and respondents' intent on planning for retirement. Each survey included 3 questions. There were other questions as well, but the main 3 we're going to look at are questions regarding interest, inflation, and risk. So they basically had respondents answer these questions regarding those 3 topics. They had to answer either A through D on most of the surveys. There were some alterations, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But again, all of these surveys did include those 3 questions. So this particular study was published in 2011, and it was based in Germany. Retirement readiness in Germany has become a concern as, again, more responsibilities being placed on those individuals rather than employers. Their research hypothesis was that financial literacy is positively correlated with retirement readiness. The motivation of the research was to explore the link of causality between these 2 variables. To do this, they used the SAVE data set, again, including those 3 questions, to better understand how financial knowledge among Germans is acquired and its impact on how they make decisions. So the methodology to kind of create an analysis of this data set, they used OLS, an instrumental variables approach, to go ahead and check for any errors in their estimation. The results were conclusive that financial literacy has a positive and significant effect on planning for retirement, which again aligns, parallels with what my hypothesis is as well. The strengths of this paper included its organization and interpretations of results. They were very detailed, from the summary of statistics all the way through the interpretations and their conclusions of how financial literacy did impact retirement planning. The one weakness that I found with this paper was its lack of comparison to other papers and similar content. They didn't really mention whether the country of Germany compares to other countries, or simply how their methodology is justified. They did, like I said, they did use an instrumental and IV approach to talk about errors in their estimation, but again, I think they could have really benefited from comparing to other papers of similar content. All right, the next paper we're looking at was a very similar study, but now done in Sweden, again published in 2011. Employers in Sweden have ceased to manage their employees' retirement benefits, again switching to those defined contribution plans, so individuals are given more freedom regarding management of their pension. The underlying issue of this reform lies the lack of financial literacy among most households. I can't reiterate it enough that individuals really aren't ready to control their own finances when it comes to saving and having enough saved for retirement. The motivation of their research was to explore the level of financial literacy among citizens of Sweden and to observe its impact, on pension planning. So they too used a survey set commissioned by the Swedish Financial Supervisory Authority and carried out by a private contractor. They used, again, OLS and an IV estimation to find any errors in their overall conclusions. Results of the study actually were a little bit different in this case. They did find, summary statistics did show that many adults 18 to 79 are lacking basic financial knowledge and are not planning for retirement, just like the other studies. However, a very weak relationship between the 2 variables was observed. Now, a little bit of background why I think this happened, and also a weakness I've included in this slide. What the authors did within the survey is they changed the interest question. So you weren't just answering A through D, you actually had to calculate the amount of interest that you would earn on a particular investment. So you'd have to actually carry out the formulas, the calculations on your own, rather than just simply picking a multiple choice answer, kind of making a educated guess. In other words, they had to actually perform the computation. I believe that this altered their conclusions in comparison with other studies. I think that it would be much more difficult to gauge whether or not someone had even a little bit of basic financial understanding by making them calculate, due to the fact that they could have made a calculation error, and it wouldn't have been a financial knowledge error. So I find that to be a weakness, and then again why they might have had a different conclusion than many other studies. They did have strengths, though. They broke down the results of the survey into subgroups. I found it interesting that not only did they break them down into education, but what type of degree they had earned. They were able to show that if you have a quantitative degree versus a qualitative degree, that you're more likely to be more financially literate and therefore better able to prepare for retirement. In looking at the last study, this one was done in 2007, but I think this is what inspired a lot of the other studies that have been done on financial literacy and retirement planning. Anna Maria Lusardi and Olivia S. Mitchell, actually these authors had contributed to other papers as well that are more recent. They kind of, I think, started this big idea that financial literacy has a huge impact on retirement planning. So again, it has been hypothesized by many that a positive relationship exists between financial literacy and wealth accruals, meaning that more financially literate individuals are more equipped to manage and save their funds. So these guys went a bit further than the basic 3 questions. They did include more sophisticated questions to see more levels of advanced financial knowledge among the participants. I won't really talk about that a whole lot, but the results were pretty much the same. Again, that financial literacy, basic or advanced, does impact retirement planning. They hope to find the causal links between financially literate individuals and more sufficient retirement planning. Again, they used a cross-sectional survey looking at the American Life Panel, opposed to the previous health retirement studies done through the University of Michigan. That's what they compared their paper a lot to, was the HRS study. They used OLS in a multivariate analysis and instrumental variables approach, again, to check for errors in their estimations. They found back in 2007 what is thought to be the same now, that financial literacy is positively correlated with planning for retirement. Results are very similar, again, between the basic questions and the more challenging questions, concluding that Americans are not financially sophisticated on a basic or an advanced level. One of the strengths of this paper I thought was really interesting was that they reversed the order of words within a question, basically to see whether or not that participants were guessing. That gave them kind of a way to check whether or not this survey and its answers were kind of valuable in terms of guessing versus actually being financially literate. Also, they tried to observe for possible endogenous variables. This included the fact that people who plan for retirement actually become more financially literate. So that variable would be an endogenous and maybe affect overall results of the OLS regression. The weaknesses of this study, in my opinion, was the sample set. The sample set consisted mainly of higher educated individuals and higher level of income participants. I think that's going to make the data a little bit skewed. I think we need a better representation of the population in order to justify our results. So in conclusion, I find it best to measure financial literacy on retirement planning by using OLS regression and ran in combination with IV estimation to find those errors in the overall analysis. I hope to actually be able to gather data from several countries across the G7 to see if the relationship remains consistent across similar economies. I did find some data, as you saw earlier, across several of the G7 and some that were not in the G7. I'm hoping to find some data maybe with that set. With a commonality of transfer from defined benefit plans to defined contribution plans, I do hypothesize that retirement planning has a big impact So I do hypothesize that retirement planning is an issue among most countries similar to the United States, and that issue does stem from a lack of financial literacy taught in schools and even at the career level.